Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultras Talk channel. Thank you so much for being here today. We're bringing a video about a topic that maybe is the silver lining of our summer after a very disappointing Copa America. The Olympics are here. And the roster is going to drop at any moment, really. I know Braden has the specifics of when it will come out, and this video will just bring our analysis and predicted call-ups. Let's emphasize that, the predicted call-up and roster for the competition. As we know, it's not necessarily what we would like to see, is what we think we will see. Some crazy reports out there on who might be the overage players. So anyways, just to let you guys know the structure of the video, we'll go position by position, who we think will be in each group. At the end, we will include the biggest snubs from the roster, and if we think this is ultimately good enough to get a medal. Straight to the point, the goalkeepers, perhaps the easiest one to pick. Braden, who do you think will be called up?
Yeah, and firstly, like you said, I'll just preface this. The roster will be dropping on July 8th. So 2 days after this video comes out, the roster will drop. It's already been finalized, to be clear. I think the deadline was the 3rd for the roster to be submitted. They already had to go to the clubs and the players to see who can get released. It's finalized already, but it's for some reason they haven't dropped it until the 8th, which I guess gives us time to predict. So getting into the goalkeepers, I think it's the most straightforward position group out of all of them, because we already saw it was basically a 3-horse race towards the end of it, but in the final camp, only 2 of them ended up making the cut. Patrick Schulte, Gabriel Slonina made the group. Chris Brady was the other one who was sort of in contention. I do think that one of the 4 alternates that may or may not travel with the team, it's kind of likely that the alternates end up staying in the States. So I guess maybe if they're European based with their clubs there, and only get flown out if there is an emergency, which would obviously make it a lot easier for clubs to release the players for the alternates. But having said that, I don't think Chris Brady will be released to be an alternate, because I think the Fire will not be happy that he wasn't made, that he didn't make the roster initially. And I think it will go to John Polskamp, as horrible as that is, but hopefully he won't be needed regardless. He was with the group in the very first camp of this cycle, and he's the only other goalkeeper who's been with them in this process, and all the other likely ones will probably be with the U20s anyway this summer. So I think he'd be the alternate. Not that it matters. It's going to be Schulte and Slonina. I think Schulte will be the starter, but who knows? Either one, I'm fine with. They're good options.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that Schulte will start. I think he's more ready, really. I think that Zelina definitely has a higher ceiling, but he had a very shaky season. And Schulte looked good in the most important game, I think, in this preparation, which was against France. So I also had a better club season than Zelina, even though it wasn't MLS. So I'm okay with him going there as well. I don't think anyone can dispute these 2 guys right here. For the alternate, it really is up for grabs. I think that it's a realistic shout. And for the one you mentioned, since he was included in the first roster. But moving on to the defenders, we'll group them in the whole defenders group. No need to go left back, full back, because, well, there's barely anyone. Only 18 players make the final cut. So who do you think USSF has in mind, Mitrovic has in mind, to bring to the Olympics, Braden?
So I went with ultimately 3 center backs and 3 full backs, because I do think that will be how the roster shakes out. Like you said, only 18 players is going to be a lot of versatility and a lot of lack of depth in a lot of places. So for the center backs, to start off, I'm going to go for the obvious one, Walker Zimmerman. He's one of 2 overage players that has been confirmed for the roster. We'll get into the other one when we get to the midfield group, but he's been confirmed that he was the only one who was actually with the group at all at any point in the last camp against Japan, where we ended up losing 2-0 behind closed doors, and then on live TV. Same result in both games. Not an encouraging camp, but he will be with the group. Probably the captain. It could also be Tanner Tessman in the midfield, who's been captaining the group for the entire cycle. I think basically whoever's on the pitch will be the captain there. I'm going to go for Jalen Neal to be another one. I think that he is the most talented out of the U23 options. Maxi Dietz, I would have hoped to see here, but he did suffer an injury towards the end of the season, which caused him to miss the last camp. I don't know if he's played back yet or not, but regardless, I don't think he'd be brought. There was a couple other options in the mix as well, but I do think it will go to Neal. And for the other spot, this one has been speculated by some people. It was confirmed by the same source that confirmed Walker Zimmerman, and the other one, Stephen Goff from, I think, Washington Post. He confirmed that they had asked about Miles Robinson, and I do think it will be Miles, just because I think that he seems to be U.S. soccer's guy. The only thing that I think would cause him to not go is the fact that FC Cincinnati do have a big problem right now with their center backs. They have a lot of injuries, but ultimately, it's also possible that they already agreed before the injuries happened and it was too late. I think Miles Robinson will be there. Personally, I wouldn't include him. I would have gone for someone who wasn't with Copa America, but I think Miles will take the last spot and the last overage spot, because I think we've all been saying since the start of this whole cycle, we need two overage center backs because the options there for the U23 players are not great. And then onto the fullbacks, I think John Tolkien and Brian Reynolds kind of picked themselves. They've been starting at right back and left back respectively for the entire cycle. And then for the other one, I think it's between two players, Caleb Wiley on the left and Nathan Harriel on the right. And I am going to go for Nathan Harriel here. Maybe it's a little bit of union bias, but I do think, and I've said this for a couple of camps now, I think he'll make the final roster because of the versatility factor. He's the only one of the fullbacks that can actually play center back that has experience there. He also has experience playing left back. And Kevin Paredes, who's probably going to make it as a forward, I think he's one of the first names on the team sheet in terms of the roster, can also play left back. So having that secondary option at left back and not really having anyone who can fill in at right back, I think that's why I think that Mitrovic will go for Nathan Harriel over Caleb Wiley in the end. And then for the alternate for this position group, I think they're going to take Jonathan Tompkinson as an emergency center back if something happens to one of our three.
Yeah, I actually think that I agree. Zimmerman will be there. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I don't think it'll be Miles, just based on the injuries. And I think that perhaps the Copa America, even though it's kind of meaningless, really, he didn't get any minutes. It's not like the guy got tired anyways, playing in MLS, should be fit. But I think that they'll take Tompkinson. So for the center backs, I think that it'll be Zimmerman, Jalen Neal, and Tompkinson. I was a little bit surprised that Neal didn't get any minutes, at least on the publicized friendly. But I think he will make the final cut. And Tompkinson, for whatever reason, seems to be a great guy in the dressing room. Everyone says he's a leader in choosing the songs and everything. So I think that he will be there. And for the fullbacks, it will be Reynolds, who I'm very concerned with. I don't think that Reynolds has the best of levels, especially marking. But hey, he can put in a good cross, so hopefully does well. Tolkien and with Caleb Wiley. I just think based on the Atlanta influence on USSF recently, as we see, that will be the new home. And I don't think he's having a stellar season with Atlanta. I don't think they'll miss him that much either. So I think that he'll probably be released. And that brings us to the best position. And also for my alternate, I was really, really confused on who to pick on this one. I would assume it would be Max Dietz. He'll be in Europe. I mean, that's where he's based out of. I think it's a very quick trip. And I think, correct me if you guys that are watching the video, but I don't think it's necessary for them to travel with the squad. A similar thing happened in 2016 with Brazil's squad and someone got injured. The player just flew out. They don't need to even be training with the camp. So moving on to the midfielders, where we have the most, well, maybe not to USSF standards because they decided to call up an overage player, but we have a stacked group right here of U23s. A lot of snubs, notorious ones in the past. Who do you think will be making the cut when it comes time?
So let's start with the obvious ones, the Venezia boys, for now. As we record this, it's very possible that one of them, if not both of them, end up leaving, but Tanner Tessman is going to be with this group. Like I said when we talked about the center backs, he has been the captain for this team the whole cycle. There's absolutely zero reason for him to not be there. And Filippo Antonelli, Venezia's sporting director, did confirm recently that he will be at the Olympics. Regardless of where he does end up, his sale to Inter is being finalized. He's going to go on loan somewhere, assumedly within Serie A, but that's not going to affect his status for Paris, thankfully, because he's a crucial part to this team, especially since the other CDM option, Aiden Morris, I'm not going to include here because I think Middlesbrough would not have released him. I think when that transfer happened, that was basically the writing on the wall for his chances to play at the Olympics, which is unfortunate for him because he's had an incredible season with Columbus Crew. He's definitely one of the first names on the team sheet in the midfield if he were to be released, but I do think that Middlesbrough will prioritize having him there for preseason because, and I've mentioned this in the past as well, when he made the move, the only reason they didn't make the playoffs last year is because of a horrible start to the season. So they're going to really emphasize having everyone there, getting a good start to the season, and that all starts with a good preseason. So I hope I'm wrong, just because I think Aiden Morris, he's probably one of the most experienced players that is actually age eligible, and I think it would definitely wouldn't hurt to have another CDM option here, but ultimately I think he won't be released and won't be here. Busiao, it's a simple situation. He'll be here. I mean, they even organized the friendly against Japan in Kansas City specifically for him. Unfortunately, he ended up being injured, so it didn't really matter, but he's going to be with the group. He's a key player here. Another one in the center mid option, I think Jack McGlynn will make it. He's been a constant with this group as well. I think him, Busiao, Tessman, and Morris would have been the first four locked in. And maybe it is because of Morris's absence that they felt the need to bring in an overage player. But I think McGlynn has done enough with the group and with the union to keep his spot. I also can't really see anyone coming in and displacing him. For the other spot, the overage one that we've been hinting at this entire time, it has been confirmed that Georgi Mihailovic will be with the group as an overage player. In terms of the quality of the player, I think he's already stepping in as one of the leaders on the team, both in terms of experience and quality. However, due to how stacked our midfield group is, I just can't see the reason for him to be here because if my predictions are right, and again, it's very possible that I'm wrong about Miles Robinson being there. I already highlighted the concerns. It could be somebody else, but if I am right, it means that there's no overage striker, which is a big problem because that's one of the positions of need with this group. And I think ultimately Mihailovic is a fine player, but the overage spot could have been used better elsewhere. And then for the final spot, and this is not a one that I would pick, just to be clear, same for Mihailovic. I think it's going to be Benjamin Kremaski. I really am not sure why, but it's very clear that USSF rates him very highly. And I think when we looked at the final camp, when we played Japan twice, it was basically between him, Cole Bassett, and Rokas Pukstis for the final roster spot. Pukstis, I don't think would have made it regardless, but it has been confirmed that Hajduk Split came out and said even if he did make it, they weren't going to release him, so he's out the window. Malik Tillman would have been on the roster, but PSV at the last minute decided not to release him. Tim Tillman was considered for the overage spot, but that would have been just instead of Mihailovic, and that doesn't really matter. And ultimately, I do think it would be better for Bassett to be here, especially since he does have the chemistry with Mihailovic at club level. But for whatever reason, USSF seems to really like Kremaski. He even made his USMNT camp debut back, and I think he even got on the pitch a while back last year. So I think for whatever reason, it will be him, which leads me to unfortunately say that for my alternate, I have Paxton Aronson. I think it's very likely that he would have been here if not for Mihailovic, because they played a similar role. They both played the 10. But I think with Mihailovic, I don't see the need for two out-and-out 10s in the roster. So I think he will be an alternate. I mean, he's been a key part of the process the whole time. I can't see them leaving him off completely. But unfortunately, I don't think he'll make the final cut.
Okay, we have some differing opinions right here because what I have is Tessman, Busiao, McGlynn, Mihailovic, and Paxton. Those are the ones that I think will go, and I think that Cole Bassett will be the alternate. I think that it doesn't make much sense to have Mihailovic there, even honestly in experience in what? Experience is only good if it's good experience. I mean, for all I know, Paxton has more experience at a better level than him in 6 months. Impressed more than what he did when he was in AZ Alkmaar for a while. Not trying to knock him down, just don't really understand that choice. I think that midfield was one of their best positions. I don't see the need for an overage one right there, especially when we have some players that have experience like Busiao and Tessman being in the trenches and getting promoted. And I honestly, I'm puzzled with this one, but those are the 5 that I have. Now moving on to the strikers, forwards, wingers, if you will. Who do you have making the final cut? I think since you said that, I'm curious who you would have being called up right here, since the 2 overage spots you've already predicted to go elsewhere. But who do you have out there, Braden?
So I'll start with the wingers. I think I already mentioned him earlier in the video when I talked about the fullbacks. Kevin Paredes will be here. Him and Griffin Yao, I think, are the first 2 names on the team sheet in terms of the wingers. They take up 2 of the 3 spots. And like I said, Paredes, in an emergency, can deputize as a left back, which maybe we'll see him do that this tournament, maybe we won't, but it's an option to have. And again, that's why I ended up picking Harriel over Wiley in that department. But I mean, Paredes should probably be the starter at left wing for the majority of this tournament. Yao on the right. Maybe they'll switch them, I don't know. And then for the other option, Taylor Booth. I think he was going to be the number 1 winger when the cycle started, but then he had some injury problems. Yao had his breakout season. Paredes even got USMNT call-ups, and I think overall, both of those players have surpassed Booth, but ultimately, I do think Booth is good enough to make the final cut. And I think the fact that he can also play in the midfield as well provides some versatility, and it's a good option because, like we've been saying, 18 players is not a lot. You're going to need players that have a little bit of versatility, especially on the fringes of the roster. I mean, this would be the final spot. So I think it just makes sense to include him, and I'm hoping that he is there because I think he's a lot better than any of the alternatives, like Jordan Morris, who you see in your name. I don't know if that's alluding to Aiden or Jordan, but Jordan Morris was approached to be an overage player here, ultimately was declined. I think in terms of the positional value, it makes a little bit of sense just because he can play as a winger, he can play as a striker. Like we said, we need an overage striker here, and maybe even a winger as well, due to some of the concerns with Booth's health for the past season and his form. But I think it's a good thing he wasn't released. He's so past it. I don't know why he's still being considered in the mix for 2024, but thankfully he won't be there, and hopefully it'll be Taylor Booth instead. For the strikers, I think it's going to be Duncan Maguire and Johan Gomez, who have been the two strikers for the entire process. In the last camp, we did see a third one brought in, Damian Downs, who plays kind of like a Haji Wright role. He's a striker by trade, but does drift out wide at times. You can see him playing in a winger position occasionally. But I think the fact that he was only there for one camp and didn't even get on the pitch in that televised friendly against Japan, I'm sure he played in the behind closed doors one, but I don't think he'll be here. It's been Maguire and Gomez this entire cycle, and if I'm correct about not having an overage striker here, I hope I'm wrong, because I think Brendan Vasquez is the perfect one to come in, especially since the Liga MX season is in off season right now. Yes, they will come in. They'll have Leagues Cup during the tournament, but I mean, it's Leagues Cup. Who cares? I'm sure they do because it's a cash grab that they invented, but it's not a real tournament. I think Vasquez would be much better suited at the Olympics, but I don't think it'll happen. Ricardo Pepi would have been here, similar to Tillman. They were both going to be on the roster, but ultimately PSV said at the last minute, no, you're already at Copa America. It was one or the other, and it kind of sucks for Malik in particular because he only had like 5 minutes the entire tournament, and now he's getting the Olympics robbed from him. Same for Pepe. I think the experience would have been great, both for the squad overall, having that proven quality up top, and for him as well, because he missed a lot of big chances in Copa America. But he won't be there, which leaves me with Maguire and Gomez. Unfortunately, I would say I'd rather have an overage guy there or someone like Pepe Balogun, but I think it will be those. And I will say for the final alternate, I think Cade Cowell will be there. We can't escape Cade Cowell. He's inevitable. He's the new Jordan Morris for this next generation, and he's going to continue to be there. And who knows, maybe he'll even be on the final squad.
Okay, well, I think that I left one spot right here because I'm a little bit hopeful on who would it be. But I'm kind of trolling right here with who I think they'll pick. At this point, if they try to go for Morris, I think Brian White is a great shout from USSF to make this roster. They're insane, as we know. So honestly, I'm going here with Griffin Yao and Paredes, who I have no issues at all. They seem to have a great relationship off the pitch as well. You see on the videos, they like to have a bit of healthy competition. Both great players with a lot of upside potential, and I think they will, both of them at some point, integrate the A team. So I'm happy with them being there. Now here with Maguire and Brian White, because I think that it's exactly the type of player. I think it's a dream. I think Don Garber, everyone in MLS would be going crazy, so happy, ecstatic with these choices. Rigid forwards that don't really have that much quality on the ball, come on. And both in MLS, call me up, sign me up. That's probably what they're thinking. And for the alternate in this position, I think it would be Cowell. I don't know. I think that Cowell will probably end up making this, but for the sake of this roster, I predicted him to be out, but I think he will end up making that. But anyways, now we have to go into the biggest snubs, because we do have some very talented players that missed out. Some were actually vocal about it as well, like Diego Luna, and even opened up the door to Mexico in his little takeaway, saying that he's ready for whichever country calls him up since he was snubbed. So biggest snubs in your opinion, Braden, and do you think any of them could make a significant impact, and in place of who?
First off, I just want to say respect to Union Academy legend Brian White. Just scored a hat trick, including one of the goals of the season, incredible back heel. So maybe that alone got him the spot on the roster. Who knows? It's definitely better than Johan Gomez and Duncan Maguire. But in terms of notable omissions, I already mentioned Chris Brady. I don't think he's a notable snub, but I think he deserved a little bit more recognition maybe in the process. I think he definitely deserves to be there as an alternate. I already said I don't think he will, but it's not that big of a snub. He's not better than either of the two that will be making the trip at the end of the day. Maxi Dietz, I would have loved to see him with this roster, even as an alternate. I believe in his quality so much more than Tompkinson, and right now even more than Neil. I mean, I know Dietz just got injured. Neil just came back from injury, kind of similar situations, but I think Dietz right now is the better player. In terms of potential, only time will tell, but I'd rather have him there. In terms of the fullbacks, I think it's pretty straightforward. Maybe Caleb Wiley in terms of mine, maybe Nathan Harriel in terms of yours, but those are the only ones. Jonathan Gomez will feel hard done by that he hasn't been included in this group at all, but there was some release problems, and I don't think he was ever going to beat out Tolkien, Wiley, Reynolds, Harriel, regardless. But he's another one. I think the common theme of these snubs is we're just going to go pick other nations because we already saw it happen with Obed Vargas. For some reason, he was mad that he wouldn't make the final roster, even though he's nowhere near ready for it, and he would have even been eligible for 2028. I don't know what he was thinking, but he ended up making the switch to Mexico. I think the same is likely a possibility for Jonathan Gomez, especially since he hasn't been given the time of day at all throughout this cycle. Speaking of those types of players, Brian Gutierrez from the Chicago Fire, I think, is another one who's very likely to make the switch, especially since he, as well as Jogo, hasn't been given the proper opportunities. I think he might have been in one of the camps, but it's too little too late. And I wouldn't really blame him at all if he ended up choosing Mexico, because I don't think he has a future with the U.S. Diego Luna, like you said, I think was treated a little bit unfairly. He should have at least been in the camp for the last one when we played Japan twice. And I think because of that, he won't end up being with the group. And again, who knows? I think he's a little bit more set on the U.S. than all these other Mexican-American dual nets are, but it's also possible. He's a good enough player where they're going to try to bring him to Liga MX, and if they do, then it's too little too late from USSF, and I think we will end up regretting that if it does happen. And then another nation switch, but finally not a Mexican-American, Esmir Bayraktarovic. I think he's going to end up going to Bosnia. He's another one who I think won't be happy about not being in the final cut for the Olympics. He's been hinting at a change to Bosnia recently, so some Bosnian fan pages as well have been pretty confident. I think ultimately he'll make a switch, and it's going to be a huge loss because he's such a talented and technical winger. Down the line, he's going to be an incredible player in Europe, so this is really one that we're going to regret losing. Aiden Morris is a snub just because I think he's good enough to be on the roster. Again, we're all assuming that he won't be released. If he's there, great. If he's not, he'll probably feel a little bit hard done by, but again, he's the one who chose the transfer, so I guess you could say that's on him. Puck's just a similar situation. I'd rather have him there than Kramaski personally, who I think will make it. I don't know if you would have rather had him than any of your midfield options, but I think he's a good enough player to impact the game in this squad. Again, Malik and Pepe will feel a little hard done by, I already said. I think they would have been perfect candidates here. Even Gio as well, just because I don't think he was allowed to thrive in Copa America. He was playing a little too deep. And especially since his club situation is so uncertain, I think getting his confidence back here at a little bit of a lower level probably would have been good for him, but none of those players will end up being there. It's a shame. I think those are really the only ones that are notable omissions or players who might feel like they deserved a little bit more of a chance.
Yeah, I think that the biggest snub really practically will be Aiden Morris, because even though I don't think he's the best player that was left out against Japan, I think we missed someone with his work rate. I think he really complements Tesman and Buzio quite well. I don't necessarily have Buzio even starting. I would have, I think Tesman's great. I think McGlynn's great technically on the ball. We just need someone to do that extra work covering in spaces. And hey, he can get dribble past a bunch of times, but he always does put the best of effort. So I like Morris in that sense. Props to him for taking the move to Europe. I think long-term for his career, even though it sucks to miss out on the Olympics, is the best. I think him, Luna, and Gutierrez are probably the biggest snubs. The other ones I kind of expected. I never truly thought it was possible for Malik or Pepe to make it. And Dietz, I mean, it's not really a snub. It's just an injury, unfortunate series of events. So I think that Luna is the biggest true snub out of this roster. When you have guys like, we played with the false nine in the past and it worked quite well. When you can have guys like Johan Gomez and Duncan Maguire getting an opportunity over you, I mean, honestly, I do see through his statements that it's probably something to deal with the manager, specifically him and Mitrovic. He said they had some misunderstandings. Mitrovic said it as well. And just leaving the door, briefly mentioning that he's open to whichever country calls him up, it's a cause for concern. I think he's a very unique player, one that could pan out as a great prospect in the future, a great talent. But I think Bajaktarovic, I like Esmir, but if he thinks that he really was making this roster, he's a little bit deluded. He's quite young, and we they are quite stacked in his position. But those are the guys that we think are ultimately going to be taken. Unfortunately, some of these nubs are already confirmed. So do you think that this is enough for us to get a medal, Braden? Keeping in mind that we are likely to face Argentina in the quarters, unless we top the group, which, hey, you never know. TT is a really bad manager, so it could happen.
That's exactly the point I was going to make. If we do finish, we assume it's going to be second in the group. We could top it. We could even get grouped. Who knows? I mean, we've already seen one U.S. team get grouped this summer. Maybe it'll be a repeat. Hopefully it's not, because, I mean, that would probably be the worst possible summer ever. But I think we will finish second. I think Argentina will finish first. They've already dropped their roster. Some very, very highly talented names on it, and ultimately I just think we got a little hard done by the draw, because I think if you look at their team, they're just better than we are. It's simple as that. Do we have a chance to beat them? Yes. Do we have a chance to top the group over France? Yes. And if we do somehow beat Argentina or whoever we end up facing in the quarters, we are in a medal game, just because we will be in the semifinals. Even if we lose there, we're in the third place game for a bronze medal. So it's a very doable path in terms of the amount of games you have to win. Realistically, you just have to win like 3 games, 2 in the group stage, 1 in the knockouts, and then win the third place game, and you're on the podium. But I ultimately, I do think it will not happen. I think if I were to bet everything I own on a possibility, I think it would be no medal. But that's not to say that it's not a possible outcome.
Okay, yeah. Now that puts a bit of a different spin on me, because I'm a very frivolous guy with my money. But if I had to bet the house and the car and everything, I don't even have a house, but the car and everything else that I have, I would probably go for a bronze medal. I still no. Of course, I would go with no medal. Actually, that's the easiest option. But I think it is possible, just for the sake of me not betting everything. I can afford to do that. I'll just say I think we do somehow push through for a silver medal. Actually, I think that depending on the draw, if we top the group, I think it could be a very favorable draw. We could get some nations along the way that I think we are more than capable of beating. But do I think we'll do it? Actually, no, because the roster, I think that some key decisions there weren't really done. I didn't like how we looked against Japan. We looked horrible on that day. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I guess this is one of the most unpredictable tournaments, because we don't know for certain who'll be in the roster. We don't know what's the physical stage of the players after a long season, or some way be saving themselves for preseason with the new clubs. We never know. So let's hope for the best. Let us know in the comments down below if you think who you think will be the overage players. Are you happy with Mihailovic making one of those choices? Isn't that awesome? I mean, look how great USSF is. And let us know, do you think we're going to get a medal? Who are the players who you will be watching from the USMNT, well, the USYNT, that can eventually make the jump to the main roster? I think that's probably the best thing that we can take away from this tournament. So make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time.